It's the beginning of hunting season for me. It's the end of like nice weather wheeling season for me. And I want to do both of those things. We're going to do both of those things in this video. And it's also crunch time for this Jeep truck. I've got a bunch of problems to solve. I think that we come up with some pretty unique solutions for a couple of these problems today. But if this video feels frantic, it's because it is.
Keep your hands to yourself. Woo!
In the last episode, we put the finishing touches on the 14 bolt. We built out the ring and pinion, so that thing's ready to go. We're geared at 513 gears. We've got an automatic locker in the rear. It's strong, it's beef, it's ready to be painted. So today I'm going to start with the high pinion Dana 60 that's out of a 2008 Ford Super Duty. This will obviously also have 513 Yukon gears, but I'm also putting a Yukon zip locker, and that's because it's selectable. Selectable lockers are they can be a little bit more trouble. They're not as worry-free as an automatic, but you get some giant benefits, especially in a front-end application, to be able to have it unlocked most of the time and then locked when you need it. When it comes to pressing new bearings on, you can definitely press like the race, like you can put a race over your bearing and press it on there. I've only messed up the cage once ever doing that. So when I can, I try to save as many different random races from old projects as I can. And in this case, I even cut the cage off of an old bearing. Looks like it was probably the same one. And it makes it a lot easier to press the bearing on whenever you have something similar size. And in this case, it looks like I actually took a grinder to the inside and augured it out a little bit so that this will easily slip on or slip back off after I press the bearing onto this carrier. I pulled the bearings off of the factory carrier so that we could access the shims that are pressed underneath them. So the ones that we're dropping in place right now, these are going to control the amount of backlash that we're going to have, and then the bearings on the other side, the shims on the other side, are going to basically control the overall preload. It's not quite that simple, but it's relatively that simple. So the reason that I'm doing this is that if it was already set to a good backlash before, and then I reuse those shims that then space everything out, then we should be in the ballpark of where we need to be, and we have a starting point. So hopefully it'll save us a bunch of steps later on down the road when we're trying to set our own backlash. Episode of this series when we were doing, dude, this thing is not focusing. There we go. Focus for me. When we were re-gearing the rear axle, I brought up that when you change the distance between these two bearings on the pinion, it's going to change the amount of drag as it spins. And there's a certain amount of drag that we need to hit, and I have a special, I've got a special tool that reads that and everything. So the way that we set that drag before was with a crush sleeve, like what came off of this housing whenever I just pulled it apart. But with the Yukon pinion, the way that they have this set is they machined their pinion up higher, as you can see. See how there's no crush sleeve and it's a little higher. And then you set that preload with shims, which can be a little trying. It takes like a little bit more time, but it's way less frustrating because getting a crush sleeve dialed in and getting everything torqued and it really is. It can be very trying. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm reusing the bearings that were already in there just because it is kind of a pain to knock all this out and then make sure that these are perfectly seated in there, especially the one on this side. I've had a problem in the past where I drove the crap out of this and it still wasn't seated all the way. And then when I went and I was actually using the front axle, out of nowhere I started to get slop up there, and it's because this then, boom, popped all the way in there. So to avoid tearing all that apart, I'm just reusing the bearings and races that were already in there. These bearings are fine. They're Koyo, so they're name brand. So I'm going to reuse these. But right now, I am going to throw some generic shim pack at this. We're going to start to assemble this and go through the painstaking process of, I'm going to start a little bit heavy, and then we'll just slowly remove shim by shim in order to get to where this drag is exactly what is called out. I've got a nut that I modified for the 99 to 04 Ford Super Duty front axle that I think is going to fit on this 05 and up Super Duty front axle. And the way I modified this is I made it to where it's not a locking nut. It like smoothly goes on and off of the pinion. And this is perfect for a situation like this where we're going to be throwing random shim packs to establish some sort of a pinion preload. We don't need it to be completely dialed yet. We just need it to have some drag and to have zero slop so that whenever we do this next step, which is going to be painting our ring gear, we have an accurate look at exactly how much pinion depth we have. I know that that's kind of a lot without seeing it, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at here. This book has everything that you need in order to read the pattern, and I went over that in the last episode, so I'm not going to do it again. But this pattern is mint. This is absolutely perfect. I like it when you can do a gear set quickly. It sucks when it takes a whole day because you have to tear everything apart, put it back together, tear everything apart, put it back together. And in this case, we've got everything exactly as it needs to be. So we're going to do one final disassembly. We're going to pull all this out of here. We're going to double check. Right now I've got our pinion preload just kind of set by feel. So we're going to double check, make sure the pinion is correct all the way out. We'll put the seal in, all that. Then we'll come up here. I'm going to add some shims onto this side in order to give the carrier bearings lots of preload. This can be a little tedious, but hopefully it won't be too bad. And then we'll do one final check to check our pattern and to check our backlash. And then it's done. We can reassemble. Like I said before, this is an air locker, so we need to send air into the housing through a bulk fitting. So there's these like small ports. There's one that's on the locker itself, and then there's one that's on the seal housing that is then connected to a copper tube, and that copper tube goes to our bulkhead fitting. We need to drill and tap through our housing in order to make this connection, and this is all worth taking the time to choose a really good location to where it's easy to route the copper tube. You know, I'd make sure that I lube the O-rings really well. Every time that I take that seal housing on and off, I'm like cleaning it, wiping it, making sure there's no dirt or anything. And if you really take your time, these can be very reliable. You've got to be very tedious in the way that you put all this together to make sure there's no dust in it. There's no way that you're going to cut one of these O-rings. Being meticulous pays off big time here. It sucks to do backlash on these axles, but it's not the end of the world. I was a little bit sloppy in the backlash between the ring and pinion, so I decided to pull the bearing off of one side. We threw a couple more shims in it to try to bring those gears just a little bit closer together, press everything back together, and then take a couple of shims off of the seal housing side in order to compensate, because, you know, the wider you make that, the harder it is to get in there. And my case stretcher doesn't fit this axle for some reason. So anyway, once I get this backlash dialed, I can basically throw a cover on it and paint it. I need to figure out transfer case. So today, Nick's in there painting. He's got the front and rear axle being painted right now, which means that tomorrow we can hopefully slide the axles underneath there with the suspension that we painted last week. We can get the rest of the suspension mounts dialed in for the frame. And while we're in the middle of all that, since we're just waiting for paint to dry today, basically, I'm gonna get these two heavy mammoth jammas into the shop. We're gonna start tearing them apart, and we're gonna turn these two transfer cases into one really good one. I would have preferred to just use an Atlas. I really like the Atlas transfer case from Advanced Adapters, and they're used in like race cars. But when I called the Advanced Adapters tech support and talked to one of their tech people about this specific build, he straight said, please don't use one of our transfer cases in that truck. And it's because of the low end torque of this Cummins. I know that there's people making like 800 horsepower through like an LS through an Advanced Adapters Atlas transfer case with no problems, but because we build so much power at like, 1600 RPM, we're making 400 plus foot-pounds. That puts an insane amount of strain on the case, and so I asked him what I should do, and he just straight up said NP205. We don't need any of this. We're only going to use the reduction portion, which is up here, and then it's going to go into a kit that we got online that will then go through the input here. So we're going to pull this off, we're going to pull that off, and it will turn this into a doubler. So we'll have reduction here, we'll have reduction in the factory 205, and it'll give us 4-to-1 reduction when we're on the trail. There are a number of companies that do NP203 to NP205 doublers. I don't have enough experience to like make a recommendation. I just used a company that amongst some of my friends I know is like quality. So I can't tell you which one to buy, unfortunately. And with the 203 205 doubler combination, there's also a lot of different options here. We're using a 23 spline input, like old school Dodge. I think it's like out of a 70s Dodge, either a Power Wagon or a Dodge Ram, one of the older ones. And it's this 23 spline I'm hoping will marry up to the 23 spline output that's on this transmission from a 1999 Dodge Ram Cummins. We're going with a Ford NP205, and the reason for this is because it's driver side drop. If we do a Chevy 205, then it's going to be passenger side drop, and it makes things much more complicated, obviously, because the front axle that we want to use is a 2008 Ford Super Duty front axle, Dana 60, and that is also a driver side drop. So for these reasons, this is how I landed on this combination of parts and pieces. So we got two levers here. This one goes into the all-wheel drive part of that transfer case. Oh, there we go. I remember doing this before. It's been like 10 years or more since I've taken apart a 203. It's similar to how I remember it. This is the exact same 203 that I used in the last doubler I built. It's just been so long that I don't remember all the details. So this little adapter that came with the kit, with this doubler kit, slides in there like that. And then that is what's gonna turn this front case on and off. So this is 2-to-1. We're really close to 2-to-1. That's 2-to-1, really close to 2-to-1. I think they're actually like 1.9 something. We'll just call them 2-to-1. So when I put this in low range and I put that in low range, we now have 4-to-1. And what's nice is that if I select just the rear case or just the front case, front case and rear case, it would be 2-to-1, which I could see there being a benefit. Like if you need a little bit more grunt or you want to keep the transmission cool, like going up a really steep grade or something like that, I could see 2-to-1 being kind of perfect for that. Well, I mean, we'll know once we actually start using it. Because if you're like in high range and you're climbing, you know, you've got 10 miles of uphill in Colorado or something, it'll be really easy to get the transmission hot. Whereas if you double it down, it would be nice to have it in 2-to-1, which, is that what this is? No, that looks like 1-to-1. So this would be 2-to-1, but we're missing a gear. So that's the next part of this install, is to take this gear off of here, and I think that bearing, and place that onto this aftermarket shaft doohickey. This kind of snap ring, I like to make sure that I can like break it free first before I really start prying on it, because sometimes you'll pry on it and it's like frozen in there. Oh boy. That's what we needed right there. Eye protection. If you've never taken a transfer case apart before, I could see why you might look at this and be a little bit intimidated, but this is really straightforward. Like, you just follow the instructions page by page, and this just goes together basically one way. It's kind of hard to mess up. You just want to make sure that everything is clean when you're putting it together, and lube up different parts that need to be, that you'd think, hey, this rotates on that. Maybe I should throw some lube on here. And you don't even need to be that crazy about what type of lube. Use assembly lube, use ball joint grease, just something that is going to make it to where this is never dry. And then as oil works its way in there when you're first starting to drive it, it'll wash that stuff out. You change your fluid, you're good to go. This is not sensitive like an engine or a transmission. Transfer cases are pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and honestly, I think this is like a good starter mechanical project if you're new to this. I would do this way before I would do an axle or something like that, like your ring and pinion. So you can see which ones need to gum loose on your side. There should be 6. I do like seeing that this mounts to the transmission instead of the transfer case. There's a lot of vehicles, they don't even have a transmission mount, it'll be a T-case mount basically. Like I've seen, I shouldn't say a lot, I've seen vehicles like that. And this way we can drop this, we're not having to support the transmission, like it's got its own thing, which I really like. So hopefully, dude, and that mount hangs down a bit. I feel like, I don't know, knowing we're in a time crunch, do we open up the can of worms of building a high clearance transmission mount?
It is kind of right in the middle of the wheelbase.
I know!
It's sort of the spot.
We will slap it, whether it's flat bellied or not. With the wheelbase this long, you will slap the belly. But, God, it's hard to imagine adding more onto our workload.
Is that coming along?
Yeah, you can have it. Your midsummer bonus.
We gotta talk about the direction these bonuses are going.
I am into your crouching Nick, hidden fabricator.
Leverage, bro.
Yeah, dude. Everybody knows that when you want to loosen a bolt, you start with the groin. Once this transfer case is separated and pulled, it's a huge moment because I'm taking a little bit of a gamble and hoping that the 203, the 23 spline 203, has enough spline engagement to actually marry to the back of this transmission. Otherwise, I'm building some sort of a spline extension thing. I do have a plan for that, but I hope that we don't have to do that.
This is what I am the most fearful of. 1 3/8 inches for mounting surface to the edge of that guy. And let's see what we are. Just under 1 3/8 inches. I said 1 3/8 inches, right? I said 1 3/8 inches. So there's from the edge, not actually where the spline's engaged, but from the edge of this input to the mounting surface, we are a 1/16 of an inch different between here and there. I'll call that a W. Oh, no, that's right. This swings down, doesn't it? Isn't that what we determined?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's, we will be rebuilding a different cross member. Either way, let's test spline engagement. Oh, slips right in there, man. Dude, and that was like plenty. I'm not worried at all now. That is so fantastic. So we will be reinventing the wheel with our skid plate and cross member situation for sure. But this unbolts, which is great. We're not cutting and grinding a bunch of stuff. We're just maybe grinding away a little paint. Well, I don't know. What do you think, Nick? Would we want to build a removable cross member? Probably, huh?
Maybe.
If we ever want to take the transmission out, probably want to have a removable cross member.
Make things easier
So,
than what we just did.
We do have a template here though that we could copy, and we could make our own cross member. We could clock this where it goes. It would be great to reuse the factory transmission mount because I know that it's rated for Cummins vibratiness and all that. But dude, I mean, it's on there. It's on there good too. So
That is fantastic.
I'm not a machinist. I don't have like super precise machining tooling or anything like that, but I do have an idea of how I think that we can get a fairly precise index for these 6 holes that we need to drill and tap. And I'm just going to use like a cheap Harbor Freight punch set, and I'm not going to be able to get these transfer punches through the holes in full length, so I'm cutting them down. We're going to transfer 1 hole through. We're going to drill it as absolute straight as possible with the drill press. Then we're going to tap it as absolute straight as possible. Then whenever I bolt that back on there, I'll be able to have a really accurate, because we'll have like 2 points locking it in, right? We've got the spline engagement, and then we have the stud that we just put on here. So that'll allow us to transfer 5 really accurate like marks to index where to drill, to then tap, to then add our studs. And hopefully at the end of this 203 will bolt right onto the back of this transmission without any adapters or anything like that. Not uncommon to see people using like ball joint grease or something to hold these needle bearings in place, but when it's hot like this, I just like to use Vaseline. This is kind of an old school transmission builder trick, and I've had 0 bad experiences with using Vaseline for this job. So for that reason, that's what this weird stuff is that you're seeing me use to hold all these needle bearings together.
That's a toe getter if you don't have steel toes. It's heavier. So this is where it's going to get tricky. The odds of all that was being tapped perfect is like non-existent.
Yeah. Oh, splines look good.
Splines look good.
And you're...
Yeah, I can't be like wiggling in there or something. Wiggle.
Progress, yeah.
Whew. Wow.
Yeah,
Dude, for having like no machining tools, just tapping it, what more could you ask for, honestly? I can't believe it worked. Nothing online verified that this would work. And so I knew I was taking a leap of faith, but I got that transfer case for $50. So I was like, if I can get a 203 that cheap, it's worth trying. And then worst case scenario, if I had to get some sort of like doubler, Magnum crawl box or something to put on front of this T case, so be it. But I wanted to try to make this work, and it's on there. The only thing I don't love is look how low that hangs down. Holy cow. But I didn't have much of an option, unfortunately. This, because of the way that this is clocked, there's not really a way with this adapter that I could have done much else. So it is what it is. We jacked the transmission up about 2 inches higher than it was before. And so I don't know if we'll be able to get a flat belly, but we are definitely going to still have more transfer case clearance than we did before. And we're putting a 4-to-1 transfer case into the mix, which is really nice. It feels unbelievable to have that 203 on there. And so now we just need to disassemble the front of this 205 and prep it to
slide onto the back of the 203, and we know that there's no problem there. I mean, this was all done by real machinists who built this adapter. So now it feels like we can just start focusing on fabrication, which is what I prefer to do anyway. Once the 205 is mounted, I do want to lower the body back down, and I want to see how high I can get these transfer cases and still have it be practical. There might be some sort of massaging that needs to happen in one place or another, but again, all that is honestly easy in comparison to trying to have like a really good, accurate hole to marry a 203 to a transfer case that's never seen one before. I just raised the transfer case up quite a bit to try to get like a flat belly type of thing going on. And I dropped the body down to see if it would hit. Oh, we're hitting something, so let's take a look. It's that goofy point on the T case right there. You know, I rotated this up whenever I drilled the front case, the 203. I had rotated it up a little bit just because I wanted it to not be like super low. But you know, now that I'm looking at it, I mean, we're pretty high off the ground. I bet we could lower this whole unit quite a bit. And if I have to massage that part of the floor, I might be able to. So maybe we can drop this an inch and massage the floor up an inch or something like that. I've got a lot of space under this seat. And somewhere around in there is where the case is hitting. Right there. Right there. It is tempting to pull this seat and just chop a hole in the floor. And I mean, look how high it is right now. I mean, that's flat belly city right there. I love it. Let's see. Oh, this camera is loving focusing in the dark. There we go. I think that focused some. That is like, we have lots of room underneath for our mounts and skids and all the fun stuff. What say you, Nick?
Cut it out.
Cut it out, bro. Okay, well, that sounds like a good project for tomorrow. I'll pull this seat, cut the floor, and do some massaging. We've been putting in tons of hours, greasy hours on this Jeep truck, and for that reason, I've got to take a break. I'm gonna go work on another project on the property. The last episode you saw where I started working on this other little parking structure back behind my barn. So I'm just gonna dig some holes, throw in a podcast, and enjoy the last couple of weeks of summer that we've got up here. And on top of that, I think I'm going to go wheeling. I really need to just get out and be in the woods with friends and drive over some big rocks. This has been a nice little side project for me to just be able to get out of the shop. We'll do 10, 12-hour days in there, and it has been so hot. Hot for Pacific Northwest, you know, in the 90s. And this is a great way to end a Friday, in my opinion. I just sitting in my machine, got a podcast going, digging post holes, and now this is one step closer. I'd like to try to get this shed built as a place to store my Samurai and my Land Rover before winter hits. So we're looking at 19 feet between this post and that post, so front to back, and then we're looking at 10 feet between the posts. It's gonna be a little snug to get the Samurai in there, but it'll fit between 10 feet. I just don't have much more space. Otherwise, I would need to rent a bigger machine and really dig into that hillside and then put all the spoils over there like I've been doing. So right now, this is just a nice little break from the monotony that is life in the shop. And now I'm gonna go get ready to take my son wheeling. You ready? Big rocks. Big rocks. played around on a few different rock gardens out here at La Jolla, and it was a ton of fun, but I found a little rock garden that I had never seen before, and it is by far the gnarliest thing I've done in the Samurai to date.
This is the nastiest obstacle I have taken the Samurai on. Still no front locker, unfortunately. This is a good time to tell you to vote for Team Dirt Lifestyle on Onyx Off-Road. If you don't have Onyx Off-Road yet, make sure you use coupon code Dirt Lifestyle at checkout for 20% off. Like a front locker. God, this thing feels so planted. Going up the rock? I think I need to be over a little bit. Dude, I wonder if I could just...
I just toggled the front locker switch, and it's working-ish if I hold it down. This is not how I designed this to be. There's honestly a really long explanation, and maybe I'll figure out a way to fix this in the future, and that'll probably be in a video. But for now, this is hope. This means that if I can get this front locker to toggle on and off, even if I have to wheel a manual while holding a front locker switch down, whatever, that means that I might be able to position myself in a way that I could get up this wild rock garden.
Why don't I climb down? I'll try going up over there. What am I hitting?
Right rear, right at the portal.
Is it like bound up?
I think I'll be able to get over it.
over. 1 foot. Oh. Here we go. There we go. Woo! Hell yeah! God damn! We're moving on to the next. Is a spider on there? We're moving on to the next obstacle. This was the nastiest thing a samurai's ever done. There's a local down there who built this and said this is only the second non-rear steer vehicle he's seen make it up this. This is so nasty. I hope that the footage turns out halfway decent. I was so focused on making it up that I wasn't very focused on filming. So anyway, I'm gonna do father-son time with my boy. He's super thirsty, I'm super thirsty. I'd say that was a pretty good test on the old Zook. So now I'm gonna go drive it and fingers crossed nothing shakes loose. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one.